The scene depicted here is tightly confined and physically desperate. An armored fighter utilizes a spear to keep a monstrous green threat at bay within the claustrophobic walls of a subterranean pool. This is the cover of the 1981 Dungeons & Dragons Basic Rulebook. Edited by Tom Moldvay, it is a 64-page manual explicitly marketed to a younger demographic in commercial toy stores. Today, game scholars and designers revere this specific document. It is widely considered a masterwork of technical layout, and its mechanical framework serves as the undisputed bedrock for the modern old-school Renaissance movement. The self-contained nature of this rule set was a direct result of the corporate and legal instability at TSR during the late 1970s. To solve these institutional problems, Tom Moldvay designed a system where rigid mathematical procedures, rather than the dungeon master's personal judgment, dictate the pace and outcomes of the game. In 1977, TSR operated a bifurcated product pipeline. The original basic set functioned strictly as an introductory tutorial. The publisher expected players to learn the fundamentals and then graduate into the vastly more complex Advanced Dungeons & Dragons system. That pipeline collapsed when the original co-creators of the game entered a bitter royalty dispute. Dave Arneson sued TSR to secure his financial stake in the expanding advanced product line. TSR mounted a high-stakes legal defense. Management argued that Advanced D&D was a distinct game system, completely divorced from the original 1974 rules. By establishing this legal distinction, the company intended to avoid paying Arneson his original 20% royalty. To end the dispute, a settlement capped Arneson's royalties on the advanced hardcovers, but guaranteed payouts on the basic line. Because of this, the 1981 basic set could no longer function as a stepping stone. It became a wholly separate, mutually exclusive game engine. Legal warfare effectively backed Tom Moldvay into a corner. Tasked with rewriting the tutorial from the ground up for long-term independent play, he designed the most mathematically elegant iteration of the game ever published. The efficiency of Moldvay's design relies entirely on its foundational axioms. The first is stochastic character generation. Players do not allocate points to build optimized characters. They roll 3 six-sided dice in order to randomly generate their 6 primary attributes. This graph maps the probability distribution of rolling 3 six-sided dice. Moldvay bounded the math heavily around the peak of this curve. Average attributes, scores of 9 to 12, provide 0 mechanical modifiers. Even if a player manages to roll absolute statistical extremes, the maximum modifier they can apply to a roll is tightly capped at a +3 or -3. The game also lacks a universal skill system. Without perception checks or diplomacy stats to rely on, players must provide granular, physical descriptions of how they search a room or interact with the environment to bypass traps. This table breaks down the race as class system. Rather than picking a biological template and applying a profession, non-humans are treated as their own distinct mechanical classes. You simply play a dwarf, an elf, or a halfling, all subject to hard level caps. This restriction mechanically enforces the sociological setting. Humans can choose various professions and progress without limit, representing adaptability. Demi-humans are specialized, culturally monolithic, and numerically restricted. By stripping away inflated ability modifiers and eliminating complex skill trees, the system demands that a player's ingenuity and lateral thinking supersede the numbers written on their character sheet. To govern this stripped-down player framework, the system provides the Dungeon Master with an objective, procedural toolset for navigating subterranean environments. This diagram illustrates the fundamental pressure mechanism of the entire game, the 10-minute turn. Moving down a corridor, carefully searching a 10-by-10 room for secret doors, or attempting to pick a lock, all consume exactly 1 turn. This rigid timekeeping drives an automatic loop of attrition. As the turns pass, critical resources degrade, lanterns burn out, and spell durations expire. The ultimate consequence of this clock is lethal. Every 2 turns, the Dungeon Master is strictly mandated to roll a 6-sided die to check for wandering monsters. In this rule set, wandering monsters carry no treasure. They represent a severe drain on hit points and resources, offering the players absolutely 0 financial reward. This procedure automatically generates tension without requiring DM improvisation. It punishes dawdling and forces the players into a constant, agonizing assessment of risk. Do we take the time to search this room for hidden loot, or do we outrun the ticking clock of unprofitable death? If wandering monsters yield no reward and combat is inherently lethal, how does the system prevent the game from devolving into an endless, frustrating slog of character deaths? Moldvay avoids this through the reaction mechanic. The moment the party encounters a creature whose attitude is not explicitly written into the module, the DM rolls 2 six-sided dice. This bell curve graphs the probability of the reaction roll. Extreme results, an immediate, unprovoked attack on a 2 or a friendly alliance on a 12, are statistically rare. This mathematical distribution shifts the encounter toward diplomacy, bribery, or standoffs, reducing table time spent on combat. When violence does break out, it is brief and punishing. Hit point pools for monsters are not inflated, and weapons universally deal low damage, often defaulting to a single six-sided die. Here we are looking at a standard monster stat block. Notice the morale parameter. This is the ultimate procedural safeguard against the meat grinder effect. The moment a monster group takes its first casualty, and again when they lose half their forces, the DM rolls 2 dice. If the result exceeds the creature's morale score, it breaks. The enemy immediately attempts to flee the battlefield or surrender. These interlocking systems simulate realistic battlefield psychology. They guarantee that low-level combat resolves as a fast, brutal rout, completely bypassing the tedium of fighting every last goblin to the death. The ticking clock, lethal combat, and behavioral probability curves all serve a single, overarching progression goal. Characters in this system earn experience points primarily by safely extracting treasure from the dungeon and returning it to civilization. Slaying enemies provides a negligible amount of experience. This flowchart illustrates the resulting economic logic. If combat is highly lethal and time summons unprofitable threats, the optimal mathematical strategy is defined clearly. Players must bypass, trick, or negotiate with the monsters, steal their gold, and escape unharmed. This mechanical loop perfectly aligns with the lore of the known world setting, particularly the frontier territory of Karamakos. The narrative focuses on localized, high-stakes survival against an encroaching wilderness, rather than epic quests to save the universe. The XP for Gold economy organically generates an environment where caution, preparation, and creative problem-solving are rewarded far more heavily than brute force. In 1983, TSR replaced Moldvay's edition with the Menser revision, famously known as the Red Box. Menser successfully expanded the game's commercial reach by rewriting the text as an accessible, choose-your-own-adventure tutorial. But among historians and professional designers, Moldvay is revered for authoring a tightly constructed reference document. The impartial systems Moldvay codified are actively powering modern gameplay at tables around the world today, prioritizing player skill over character statistics. The 1981 rulebook provides a definitive lesson in technical game design. Objective, mechanical frameworks generate more effective tension than a dungeon master relying on improvisational storytelling. Within its 64 pages, the basic set stands as proof that strict mathematical constraint and procedural logic breed the purest form of player creativity.